Here's a slogan that's used a ton in the program. It works if you work it. I understand the intent of this phrase is to reassure people that if they do it right, do the steps just so, they will find the relief they seek. It's meant as motivation. If 12-step programs saved your life, this video is not here to argue with that. This is about the people they didn't help and what we do with that information. Unfortunately, there are people for whom the program doesn't provide relief. Whether you define relief as staying sober, not eating compulsively, not gambling, or finding the spiritual awakening promised to everyone if they diligently work all 12 steps. When a method is framed as universally effective, failure often gets interpreted as a personal shortcoming rather than a mismatch of approach. This can have the opposite of the intended effect and be demotivating. Depending on how success is defined and measured, studies on AA outcomes show an extremely wide range of effectiveness, roughly anywhere from single digits to around 40%. Even if we take the most generous interpretation of these numbers, it's hard to believe that a majority of attendees simply aren't trying hard enough. More likely, it reflects a mismatch between their situation and the recommended cure, or an underlying condition that isn't being addressed by the steps. As an example of a mismatch, in Step 3, participants are directed to turn their will over to an outside agency. Trauma recovery, by contrast, necessarily focuses on restoring self-leadership and executive functioning. These two aims, those of the program and those of trauma recovery, are incongruent. The more a trauma survivor practices relinquishing agency, the farther they move from the very capacities trauma recovery requires. Trauma is, at its core, a violation of agency. The idea that healing requires surrendering one's will to an outside power reflects a philosophy that is incompatible with trauma recovery. Any approach that frames relinquishing agency as a virtue, rather than on restoring it as a necessity, risks re-traumatizing the people it claims to help. This is not a critique of spirituality or faith, but of confusing having faith in a higher power with psychological healing. Regarding underlying conditions, imagine if a certain diet promised to restore someone to a healthy weight if they just follow directions, but there's an underlying condition like gluten intolerance or diabetes that isn't being addressed. They may see some positive results from the prescribed diet, but until the core medical issue is treated, they probably aren't going to see significant progress. The same can be true of trauma recovery. Without addressing underlying issues of PTSD and its symptoms, any other healing is likely to be incomplete at best. It is my fervent hope, and my reason for starting this channel, my reason for writing my book, that more therapists, coaches, and trauma survivors will become aware of the potential mismatch between 12-step programs and trauma recovery and look for more and better solutions. There is no one-size-fits-all solution, no matter how sincerely, diligently, or desperately someone works it.